Let's talk about how to make a video game that actually sells on Steam and why you don't need a hook. The problem is that when talking about hooks, everybody kinda means something else. What I mean is something like this. You have a pitch, a platformer, but with gravity shifting, bada boom. So this is your hook right there. And then you go everywhere and pitch your game as a platformer, but with gravity shifting, bada boom. You tell your friends about it, you tell the publisher about it. So a mechanic that sets your game apart and is designed to get your attention. And specifically I'm talking about mechanics. So I know that there are also different ways to use the word hook. Like some people say like there's a gameplay hook, there can be a story hook, there can be an art hook. For the purpose of this discussion, I specifically mean mechanics. You don't need a hook, so what I'm talking about is you don't need a mechanic that sets you apart. And we'll also talk a little bit about what you do need instead. And not just a little bit, I'll straight up tell you what I think you do need instead. First of all, let's talk about why this is maybe not the correct approach. Let's say you want to make a game with gravity shifting bada boom, a platformer but with gravity shifting bada boom. This is like your Steam page, and then the customer sees it and it's like, oh, a platformer, could be fun, I guess. And the truth is, most players don't really care about mechanics. Compared to something like this, what do we see here? It's not a very interesting mechanic. Watering plants is not a very interesting or unique mechanic. That's what we see here. It's like clicking to water a plant. Not a crazy, unique mechanic. And still the customer's like, oh my god, I get to be a drug lord. And the reason for that is because the context of the mechanic matters, not so much the mechanic itself. Players care about experience. And what does this mean for how we should make games? It probably means we should start from the experience. When Paul and I made Thronefall, we struggled a lot with the prototyping. We made so many prototypes and we didn't really get anywhere. And the problem, I think, was that we were too focused on gameplay, because at some point we wrote this onto our Miro board: build and defend your castle. So very clear fantasy, very clear vision. And from that point on, things started falling into place so much more easily, because we defined our experience, and all of a sudden our prototypes became way more targeted. All of a sudden our research became way more targeted. Like we could do way more specific research into art styles, into castles, into other similar games, into how to stylize the game potentially, and so on. Way better quality research led to better decisions. This is like an early look of our game that you see here. And it eventually turned into a game that sold over 1 million copies. I don't know why I did the voice like that. Always a bit uncomfortable to brag about numbers, but it gives credibility, so that's why you kinda gotta do it. Also my other games, I think large reason for why they work is because they're all very experience focused. Like Islanders, it's not really a game about getting points from placing puzzle pieces, right? It's not about the mechanic, it's about building islands. You Snail is not about jumping, it's about the evil AI, the interactions with the evil AI. You can see it a little bit in the background here. Thronefall is also not a game about draining health bars. It's a game about building and defending your kingdom. So it's always about the experience. And I think that's why they worked. So what about this? What about pitching your game like this? Hooks are cool. I think they actually even kind of work. That's confusing. Didn't you just say they don't? Not quite. I think they do work. I think they do work, but you're putting yourself in danger. Because a lot of people who do this, they forget to care about the experience. And if you do that, then you're in trouble. And this is a fun example. This is a game called Marky's Adventure. I've talked to the dev on Twitter, but this is very interesting because the game did not do very well. And this is honestly a very typical example of a gameplay hook. It's like a platformer, but you can turn into a shark. So it turns out that is kind of not enough to sell the game, apparently. But then the same developer made another game called Pedal Pedal Pedal. And you can see it also doesn't have the greatest art. I think we can quite generally all agree on that. But it did like way better. And the reason for that is that the fantasy and the experience is just such a more compelling pitch. Like even here on the capsule image, it already sells the fantasy so much more. It's like you're in a boat together. Together with your friend, you get to paddle. So if you ask me, the difference is this one is a mechanics-focused pitch and this one is an experience-focused pitch. You don't need a hook. Players aren't fish. They are people looking for cool experiences. So what you gotta do is make cool experiences. which may or may not include hooks. Another very fun example is Megabonk, which has been going kind of viral recently. It's doing super well, and it's also a very experienced focused game. It's like purely about the power fantasy, tons and tons of enemies getting at you and you're just slashing them all, and you get to break the game, build really powerful builds, and just basically full-on power this fantasy, destroy all of the enemies kind of thing. And it works. It works. Here is kind of a useful way to think about this entire thing. I think about game development in like 4 main pillars that you need to solve. You need fun for keeping players, you need appeal for gaining players, you need scope for being efficient, and you need monetization for paying rent. Quickly wanna talk about what I mean with appeal, because it's also one of those ambiguous words that might mean different things. For me, appeal is anything that creates reactions like I want to be that, I want to explore that, I want to prove myself with that, I want to spend time with that, I want to know the story, how the story unfolds, I want to tinker with that. So an unsatisfied urge that is typically activated visually. Most people start here, most developers start here, and then they are like, but we should also have a way to gain players. Like, it's not enough to just be fun, let's also create a way to gain players. So they extend out this little hook and are like, look, our gameplay is really cool. We have cool gameplay, come in. I think the more native and usually better solution is to just cover this natively, instead of like hooking over from a different field. But eventually you need to check all 4 boxes. If you want to make a commercially successful game, you need to check all 4 boxes anyway. But where should you start? I don't think you should start with monetization, because monetization, it's kind of disconnected from the other ones. For indie games at the very least, you can kind of worry about it at the very end. And also it's relatively straightforward compared to the other ones. The next one is a bit more controversial, because I also think fun is kind of easy. I have to say it's not easy for everybody. Like, it's not like when you just start making games, making fun games immediately gonna be super easy for you, but it's like once you've been making for a couple of years, once you have a little bit of experience, once you know how to iterate properly, making a fun game is not really the problem anymore. So once you gather and collect some skills, then this stops becoming the problem. So I do think that the main problems are these 2 right here. I think appeal for gaining players and scope for being efficient, those are the main problems you should probably start with, because they're the most difficult to get right. So the main problems are making games that players want to play before playing them, so that's appeal, and doing so cost efficiently, that's scope. And so maybe you should start your next game project by addressing these problems first? ? I think you should. The question is, of course, how? There is no easy answer. That's why it's the main problem. But I do have a couple of ideas for you, and the first one is actually to use a hook. And with that I mean a gameplay mechanics hook. Your gravity shifting bada boom. The pros of this strategy is that it creates intrigue, and it is indeed cost efficient. That is for sure. It's a cost efficient way to do it. Problem is it's overused and players don't care that much about it. So I think my summary would be maybe use it as a bonus, but don't use it as a standalone strategy. A game that does this well, in my opinion, is Portal, because it does have a very strong gameplay hook. It does have the portals. But you can see on this screenshot here, for example, there's not a single portal on the screenshot. That's why I chose the screenshot. And you can see that even without portals, Portal is still a super appealing game. So Portal still kind of works without the portals. People would still want to play this without the portals, is what I'm claiming. So this is the correct way to use a gameplay hook, not as a standalone strategy. Second idea, iterate on proven formulas. This is kind of what we did with Thronefall. Because Thronefall is very strongly inspired by Kingdom. I think it's fair to say that. The advantage of that strategy is that it's relatively safe, because it's already been proven. The disadvantage is that it requires some skill to pull off well, and you need to do it best because others will also try. Like, if people see that something's successful, then it will spawn a bunch of copycats, and people, like, not necessarily copycats, but people who are inspired by the idea. So you gotta be able to compete with those. But if you do it well, then it's a relatively safe strategy, because it has already been proven. It's already, like, the demand is already proven. Another example, once again, Megabonk. Just combine 2 very successful games like Risk of Rain and Vampire Survivors, combine them tastefully, and you get another very successful game. Voila. Idea 3. Find a gap in the market. This is, I would say, what we did with Islanders. It's a very high reward strategy, but it's also hard to find and it's hard to verify. I would very much claim that at the time where we published Islanders, there weren't any super hyper minimalist city builders on Steam, at very least not that I'm aware of. In hindsight, I learned that there are a couple of games that are similar to Islanders, but they weren't super popular, and I'm not sure if they were on Steam. And also, we didn't know about them. So I think we very much found our own niche with Islanders at the time, and it worked out very well. It's high reward, but it's also risky. If you can pull it off, then good for you. Idea 4, start with a fantasy. This is one of our favorite methods at Grizzly Games. This is Superflight, a game a couple of my friends made before I joined Grizzly Games. It's a game where you fly in a wingsuit and all you do is like dodge these little shapes and so on. And this is all about the fantasy. It's just about flying in a wingsuit. It's easy, it's super impactful, and if you pick something that people find appealing in reality, then you can be pretty certain they're also gonna find it appealing in a game. The only disadvantage I can see is that it sorta limits other options you have. For example, like we can't have swarms of enemies spawning in or something that would like take attention away from the core fantasy, that would make it more confusing, would make it maybe even more difficult to market, or we would have to use a different strategy at least. Like if we go for the fantasy of flying in a wingsuit, then we need to make sure that we fully serve this fantasy and fully support this fantasy. And that's what Superflight did, and it worked out really, really well. Another one, this is one that I got from Gavin, the Choo Choo Charles creator. Translate other successful media, and this is also a very good strategy. For example, if you have a super successful show like Breaking Bad, and then somebody comes along and basically copies the vibe into a game. This is a screenshot from Schedule 1, of course. Then of course it's gonna work out well if you do it tastefully. So this can hit really hard. You already know that it's successful, like you know that the topic is popular, but it's difficult to do tastefully. Like Schedule 1 is not the first game that tried to copy the Breaking Bad vibe, it's just the first one that managed to do it tastefully enough to actually make it work. So this is, even though this is a very hard-hitting strategy, it's also kinda rare. Paul and I think kinda have, like the idea for our next game kinda falls into this category. We'll see, we're currently still prototyping. Idea 6, also from Gavin, design your appeal factor first. So this is something Gavin did with Choo Choo Charles, which I find a very interesting strategy. He designed basically the game for the trailer first. He spent like 1 or 2 months just making the trailer for the game, and then the entire development for the game was essentially after that. If you pull it off, you can sleep very well, right? If you have a viral trailer, then you can sleep very well at night. You're already gonna know that your game's gonna do well when it comes out, with a very high certainty, I would say. But it also requires a very specific skill set, and it's also hard to do efficiently. And I would also say it's not entirely risk-free. I would say it's lower risk than making the full game and then finding out if it works. But it could still be that you spend a month or two trying to make a viral trailer and it just doesn't work out. Then you still lost 1 or 2 months. Like, I wouldn't bet on this working every time. Got a tech advantage. This is one of the most underused ones. It's very powerful as well, I think. More people should do this, because you have a lot less competition to deal with, and it also unlocks new kinds of appeal. Let's, for example, say you have a very cool voxel engine that only you have access to, and not a lot of other games are doing this, because it's difficult to do. If it's difficult to do, then you have less competition, right? For example, not every developer knows how to use ECS and have like millions or thousands of enemies on screen. So if you have the technology and the capabilities to do something like this, then you have less competition and you unlock new kinds of appeal, like you see here, like screenshots with thousands and thousands of enemies, very specific type of appeal that not everybody has access to. Only thing I would say is that it's also not an auto-win. You probably need to combine this strategy with a couple of other strategies to make it work. A good example for tech advantage is Neuter, like the game where every pixel is simulated. This is just something that's still very difficult to do. I think they had to write like an entire custom engine essentially to make this work, but Neuter sold really, really well. Like, it's an absolute mega hit. And that's because not a lot of, I don't know any games that are really competing in this niche. So you can really carve out a very good niche with this strategy. What I want to make clear is that there are lots of solutions. Like the 7 that I just showed you are by no means all of them. I think there are lots and lots of strategies to tackle the problems. But you need to focus on the correct problems. This is the main thing that I want to stress in my little talk here, and that I want to take you away. The wrong problem to focus on is this. What goes after the but? This is what a lot of new developers focus on. They're like, I want to make a platformer, but I need to make it unique, so I'm gonna make a platformer, but... And then they think filling in this gap here is the main problem. That's not the case. The main problem are these two right here. How do I make something appealing that players wanna play before they play it? And how do you do so efficiently in a way that's not gonna take you 10 years? If you can solve this problem, then you're very, very well set up for success. Thank you. That's it.